Stop, Sean, my head is hurting. It's hurting. I can't take it. Welcome back, everybody. So, David Lynch, how much do we love David Lynch, Sean Vickers?
The size of the planet?
It's off the scale, isn't it?
Off the scale. It's one of those questions that I couldn't possibly begin to answer. Hi, everyone. Yeah, wow.
So here's the interesting thing. Mulholland Drive came out in 2001. I hadn't seen it until recently because it's just been reissued, remastered, 4K. It looks amazing as well. Lots of special features on the Blu-ray. We'll talk about those later. But yeah, I hadn't seen it up until now, which is weird because I love David Lynch. This isn't, I have to say, disclosure right at the beginning, it's not my favourite David Lynch movie, but I know it's a firm favourite with so many of his fans.
Which one's yours? Is it Blue Velvet, Inland Empire?
Blue Velvet and Eraserhead.
Amazing. Oh, yeah, and
Twin Peaks, obviously, if you're talking TV. I mean, apart from the movie Fire Walk With Me, which I still haven't seen. I know that's controversial.
Oh, it's quite scary. David Bowie's in Fire Walk With Me.
So, Mulholland Drive, where do we start with this? Do you want to sum up the story? Because this is so complicated, isn't it? In so many ways. We're talking about this just now.
I'll sum up the story, which I think people think the story is, and then I'm gonna poo-poo that entirely and tell you what the story is. We start in the Hollywood Hills with this celebrity actor. Her car crashes. She stumbles out of the car. She stumbles down the Hollywood Hills. She finds herself in this kind of small, kind of like bungalow cottage. She kind of hunkers down, and the camera kind of leaves her there. And then it cuts to Naomi Watts arriving as this character called Betty, and she's very bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and she's in LA to find her fortune. She also finds herself to the same cottage or bungalow, which is owned by her auntie, and bumps into the lady. And when she asks the lady who she is, she goes, "I don't know who I am," and thus begins this story of trying to find out who the stranger is. That is the crux of the beginning of the story, but that isn't the story.
I had to think about this when I was writing notes about what to say during this review. And there is so much to talk about because you could interpret this movie in your own way. And I think David Lynch does love it when people do that. He says it's like an experience. You're meant to kind of move away from reality when you're watching a movie. Yeah. And I guess amnesia does play a big part in this film as well, because as an actor, and obviously this film talks about Hollywood and the dreams, the aspirations of being an actor in Hollywood, you're meant to kind of remove yourself away from reality as an actor because you're taking on someone else's role. And as a viewer, obviously, watching the film too, you also want to let go of reality. So I think this film does really sum that up quite well.
So you've got this storyline. You have this character, she doesn't know her name, so she calls herself Rita. You've got this character called Betty. They're in LA. They're kind of find out who Rita is. There are some visual cues, some like Easter eggs within this initial part of the film where you're starting to think, Rita starts to realise this name Diana. She says this kind of means something to me. They find this name Diana Selwyn in the phone book. They call the apartment of Diana Selwyn, but no one picks it up. But they don't recognise the voice, but she thinks she knows who it is. Then there's like a very racy lesbian scene. And then what they find themselves in this theatre, and the theatre really is the giveaway. In the theatre there's a person on stage saying, there is no band, there is no orchestra, this is just a tape, this is not reality, this is not real. Prior to this, we've seen this blue key flowing around. At the end, this quite emotional scene, it's actually an amazing scene in cinema, that whole Silencio scene. They find the box where the key fits, and when they put the two together, they unlock it, a chap comes along and says, time to wake up. And in some ways, that's where the movie starts.
So the box is almost like Pandora's box, isn't it? It's like this kind of gateway back to reality. Once you've analysed it, when you've seen the whole film, and obviously there are going to be spoilers in this review because I don't think we could do it without spoilers.
It's also 20 years old.
But you mentioned the eroticism of this movie, which I know that one critic at the time was saying it's possibly the healthiest, most positive, amorous relationship ever depicted in a David Lynch movie, because we haven't really seen it so much before with his films. Not to that extent, I don't think.
No, like you think about Isabella Rossellini in Blue Velvet, it's not particularly healthy.
Yeah, nothing is healthy in Blue Velvet. Nobody's mental state, certainly, as a viewer also.
Yeah, so you've got this thing that suddenly, where I think the reality of this film comes in, view's my own, and there's going to be David Lynch fans who are going to be like, that's a load of bollocks, Sean. But at that point where he says, now time to wake up, you cut to a similar set of people who look like the people at the first half of the film but are entirely different. You realise that Naomi Watts is actually Diana, this person that they've all been kind of seeking, and Laura, who played the lady who'd forgotten her memory, is actually her lover, Camilla. And the story really is about jilted love, because Naomi's in love with Laura's character. So Diana is in love with Camilla. Camilla is with Theroux, Justin Theroux.
I know, that's an easy slip up, isn't it?
Who is the film director, and she feels jilted and she's jealous, and so basically she gets a hitman to kill her lover Camilla, and the story basically follows, which is basically the last 25 minutes of a 2.5-hour film. The hitman does his job, Camilla gets killed, and she gets so fulfilled with guilt, and she has a breakdown and kills herself. Now that all plays out prior to the dream. In the dream, she foresees her death. She foresees who she is. So the film really is about lesbian jilted love, and the first 2 hours is the dream and the subconscious of guilt and trauma played out how Lynch wants to play it out, which is why it's amazing. Isn't
it brilliant? Because you think about David Lynch, you think there's so many scary elements in so many of his movies and TV shows, like Twin Peaks, it was Bob. We had Blue Velvet, obviously the crazy Dennis Hopper character that he played. You know, the mask and everything, and there's so many disturbing elements. With this, I think the fear really is the deceit. It's the deceit of wanting that Hollywood dream, and obviously the deceit from, you know, the people that she's having relationships as well with. So I think that's really clever, because it's that kind of mystery neo-noir David Lynch style, but obviously the fear is completely different.
So now we've been through the whole thing, we go right back to the start. Naomi Watts' character in the dream, Betty, is fictitious.
Can I stop you there and just say I love the fact that there's a character called Betty in this film, because it's such a British thing as well. We think of Betty's tongue, we think of Graham Norton, we think of Betty in Frank Spencer. Brilliant. So yeah, big tick for me.
In the dream sequence, Betty is this purified version of Diana. She's the way that she thinks she should be in LA. So she's this wholesome, you know, she looks so fresh-faced. She goes to castings and they love her. No, the casting director in the dream sequence loves her, but in reality, it transpires that the same casting director hated her. So a dream sequence is playing out this idea of Betty, but Betty isn't real. She's actually fictitious. Then comes in the second twist. The character played by Laura Harring isn't Rita. She's also Diana. Naomi Watts and Laura Harring are both Diana.
Stop, Sean, my head is hurting. It's hurting. I can't take it. When you analyse it, it makes perfect sense. But when you're explaining it, you're doing such an amazing job.
That's the thing that blows your mind. One is this purified version of her, how she perceives it in her dream sequence, the subconscious. Yeah. And the other is the person going, what's gone on and why do I have this key and what is happening and I can't remember. And that's her guilt. It comes through. So in a weird way, now she basically has lesbian sex with herself.
Yeah. Yeah, and you think about the first kind of 3/4 is the main bulk, and then you get that closing epilogue. Can we talk about the music though as well? Because I think that's such a strong, you know, part of the success and the reason why so many David Lynch films have worked, because of Angelo Badalamenti's score. And he's actually in the film as well. Did you notice he was in this?
Oh, I didn't. I did see Billy Ray Cyrus.
Yes, and yeah, Billy Ray Cyrus plays Gene. So he plays the guy that is seeing the director's wife, isn't he?
He's having an affair with the director's wife. Yeah, Billy Ray Cyrus.
Yeah, so Angelo Badalamenti, he actually appears as the guy who is trying to finance or is financing the director's film.
Oh, right.
Do you remember he sat there with his espresso and he's got the napkin and he spits out the coffee?
You know what, recently I was talking about him in UNFLOPPED actually, because I was talking about Birthday by the Sugar Cubes.
Oh, love that song.
And when the start of Birthday starts, it has that really amazing dum 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 dum.
That's right.
Is the same notes that comes out of Laura's theme for Twin Peaks, which he wrote and won a Grammy for. Yes, and there's I was telling it on Flop, there's no connection, no one ever ties the two together. But the Birthdays by the Sugar Cubes came out, I don't know, 2 years before. You talk about the scary element. For me, when I watched it the first time, the thing that I found absolutely petrifying was that guy that's hiding behind the wall. Literally, when I started watching it again, I was like this, because I was like, I know exactly what happens here. Now, the reason why, I'm going to give you another fan, like, this is why I think what happened here. The guy who said, this is a dream that I've had, and I walk behind this wall, and this thing is so scary that he scares me to death. That's the guy that sees the transaction in real life between Naomi and the hitman. He's in the bar and sees it, and that's playing out in her head.
Isn't he meant to be part of that box as well? He's the reason for the box linking them to reality and back and forth from dream to reality.
That's where I think you get into real, like, what does the box really mean, right? And I'm playing on 2 levels, maybe 3 levels.
Don't go anymore. Can't cope with any more than that.
Now you could go even further, because then you could say, why is the guy from Twin Peaks there in that room? Is there some other thing at play, right? And that's where David Lynch is really clever, because he's like, is there a 4? You choose. Once you piece together that it's an unfractured story and one bit is dream and one bit is it's not linear, it's non-linear, the last bit, you can kind of suddenly go, I completely understand Mulholland Drive, which people have been trying to say for 20 years, but it's all there. And when you know it, you go back and you watch it and you go, this is in plain sight. The whole thing's in plain sight.
Oh my God. And it's so terrifying. You're absolutely right, because the way the camera just pans up to the wall and it's like you're about to see something coming around the corner and you know it's coming. That's the worst thing, is that you know it's coming, but it's still terrifying because he just appears. And there's something so brilliant about the way that David Lynch does scenes like that, because they're quite trippy and they're quite hypnotic and they lure you in as a viewer. You're kind of wanting to see it, but then it appears and it's horrific.
But that's what he used to do in Twin Peaks, and that's what he does really well in Firewalk with Me, which is like, he does this thing which is really, it's about emotion. And so you have this thing in the pit of your stomach just going, oh God. And it's the way the sound works, it's the way he moves the camera. All of these things just really, really scare you. You know, that's what I always found. You know, like, there were bits of Twin Peaks that I thought were petrifying, but I don't know why.
But I think that, the score is definitely part of that, because Angelo Badalamenti's got this beautiful, like, piano score that sometimes sounds discordant. It sometimes goes against the grain a bit and does sound really edgy. I know that David Lynch obviously, puts some of that through Pro Tools. He puts effects onto that and distortion, so that adds to the nightmarish quality of it.
Gosh, what else to say about it? There's just so much. Like, this idea of trauma and guilt and how they interlock with each other, and that's in the dream. So he's trying to get across trauma and guilt, but through the idea of dream and subconscious. We were talking about this slightly earlier, like that Aubrey Plaza film that we watched plays with the same idea, around how characters move around and how things are perceived. That film we watched with Willem Dafoe, which is all about a dream. It's all these ideas around this construct, the dream construct, and what can happen within the dream construct. When people watch Mulholland Drive, people are like, oh, it's just a David Lynch film, right? You just don't really get it. You're not supposed to get it. You're supposed to let it wash over you. But he's giving you, once you know the framework that you're working within, it becomes incredibly clear, I think. And then, at times I think there's a bit of like dark comedy. It's like camp, the bit where, like, Justin Theroux pours paint over that woman's jewelry and then they have a fight. It's actually weirdly camp and a bit Almodovar. It's like, it's like all over the place. That's what I love about it. And then another moment, you're absolutely petrified.
He definitely gives you clues. As a viewer, I think if you are a fan, you'll pick up on those clues as well. A lot of visual clues, especially. Yeah. It's like he'll zoom in on, I don't know, an ashtray or a coffee cup or something. And a key, like the key on the table. Obviously, that's the key to the box. But all these little clues, and if you watch it as a whole and then look back and so that makes sense why we got those clues in the first place. Did you know that this was filmed originally, it meant to be a TV show, meant to be a TV series?
I think I was aware of this, and was he not rescued by one of the French studios?
I think he was, because I think initially it was something to do with the network that were unhappy with certain things.
I mean, an absolutely phenomenal. I think the BBC said it was their best movie of the 21st century. Like, it's got some huge old accolades, this film, and you know what? It's right up there for me. I mean, I think it's a flawless piece of cinema. I think every time I watch it, I get another Easter egg and I get another aha moment. Well,
you just said before we started recording, you said you want to go and watch it again, and it had the same impact on me as well, because now that I understand so much more of it, I want to go back and watch it again. Interesting, though, to pick up on one of the special features. There's a clip of a guy, I think he works in a cinema, and he's watched it 26 times. And he says, every time I watch it, it makes less sense than when I saw it the time before.
It's just a great, if you haven't seen it for a while, maybe not listen to what I've said. Maybe you have your own views about what you think this film means. I have unpicked it, and I think I know what it is, but it could all be complete nonsense. But it works for me, and I'm going to hold on to that.
There are some really good special features, gotta say, because obviously it's been remastered and reissued now for 2021. It's been a long time coming, but there's interviews with Laura Harring. Laura Harring. There's an interview with Angelo Badalamenti, which is great. There's analysis. There's two French guys that are David Lynch fans that have picked picked the film apart and interpreted it how they think it should be. But obviously David Lynch, you know, he's keen for viewers to just have their own view on it.
Yeah. And like you say, Phil, with the blue box, it's like, and the whole thing around Mr. Rogue, like, is there something at play that's even beyond the subconscious? You know, because there's a supplanting of this idea around Camilla Rhodes, who's played by, in the dream sequence, she's played by Melissa George from Heartbreak High.
Oh, yes. And she was in, what was she? She was in a soap as well, Home and Away.
She played Angel in Heartbreak High, and then I think she was in Home and Away. So it's nice to see her. She pops up. I bet, you know, and there's this idea that she's supplanted. Like, even though the mafioso was trying to give her the part, that there's something even more behind the scenes about how that lands, and that person is actually Camilla Rhodes in real life, which is Laura. So, like, how does all that come about? How does she get to be the lead in this film? Do you know what I mean? All of that ties together in the psyche of Diane Selwyn, who's played by Betty, who's played by Naomi Watts.
Brilliantly summed up. Hats off to you, Sean Vickers. So yes, as I said at the beginning, it's not my favourite David Lynch movie, but I absolutely love it. It's 4-star for me for the reason that obviously I prefer other films that he's done that have been more enjoyable. But I do think it's brilliant for so many reasons. But yeah, 4-star.
If you could fill my entire screen with stars, that's how many stars. And you know I'm a very, very hard marker. But like, if I could give it more than 5 out of 5, I would. Like, it's brilliant.
I know you can't see them now, Sean, but there are stars filling up the screen. In fact, they're covering your face.
Oh my God, get it off my face. Not in my face.
Brilliant. So Mulholland Drive, have you seen it? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Plenty more stuff where this came from. We have got movies coming out of our ears, which I'm sure David Lynch would appreciate.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, let us know your thoughts. Let us know what you think about this film. Let us know, because I think the more the fans talk about the films, the more we all kind of have a bit more of a window and we change our perception of what's really going on in these movies. But just brilliant. So that, Phil, it's been an absolute pleasure to watch Mulholland.
Fabulous. Good to see you, Sean, and thank you everybody for watching. See you next time.